We have made it to September, which means it is time for me to tell you about everything that I read in the month of August. We have 7 books to get through, so let's get started. Actually, before we get started, I want to show you some of my stats from Storygraph because the average time it took me to finish a book was 6 months. Because I finished 2 books this month that have taken me a very long time to get through, and that was Dune and Paladin's Faith, so I finally finished both of those, so that's very exciting. While we're here, let me show you the rest of the stats. I read mostly dark things this month. Not surprised that most of the books were medium paced. We do have more books over 500 pages than usual because I read Dune. That fiction nonfiction split isn't super surprising to me. I haven't been reading a lot of nonfiction lately though, so the fact that it's not 100% maybe is a little bit surprising. And we read mostly fantasy, thriller, and horror this month. Oh, let me also show you our star ratings. We had a fantastic reading month this month. I didn't give a single thing below a 3-star rating, and I had 3 5 stars. So we had an excellent reading month. Let's start by talking about I Was a Teenage Slasher because technically I finished this in July. I just forgot to log it in Storygraph, so I haven't told you guys about it, and it is 5 stars, incredible, fantastic. One of my new favorite horror books of all time, so I can't believe I missed my opportunity to gush about this last month. This is not my first rodeo with Stephen Graham Jones. I adore the Indian Lake trilogy. My Heart is a Chainsaw is one of my favorite horror books of all time. That trilogy really is a love story to the slasher genre, and this book, I Was a Teenage Slasher, is very much the anti-slasher because our main character is a reluctant slasher, and we get to be in his head and figure out as he and his friend are kind of like along for the ride in this slasher magic that they get swept up in when they really do not want to be there. They're trying to learn the rules of the slasher genre and see how much agency they can have within it while trying to break out of it. It's also a really great depiction of teenagers being teenagers. It does get gory and gross and slashery and bloody. I found it to be incredibly entertaining all the way through and a really fresh take at the slasher genre. So I loved it, and I would 100% recommend that you pick it up as well. Next up, we have to talk about everything I read during my 24-hour readathon. If you haven't checked it out, I stayed up all night. I get very delirious. It is hilarious. Enjoy. I picked up A Sorceress Comes to Call, which is T. Kingfisher's newest release. I adored this book. I love it so much. It is a Goose Girl retelling. I love where T. Kingfisher took this story, and I, for a long time, have loved how T. Kingfisher in the Saint of Steel series, which we'll get to in a second here, has older main characters, and we get to see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s instead of just teenagers and 20-somethings. And I also love her middle grade and how she gets that 10 to 14 range so well as well. And in A Sorceress Comes to Call, we've combined both of those. So we have a main character who's 14. Her mother is this sorceress. She is a bad woman. We do not like her. Her mother has just picked them up and moved them to a new town, and she's now trying to seduce this man who has a sister who is our other main character, and she is 50 years old and develops this friendship with our 14-year-old character. And really we end up with this glorious little cast of characters who all have different personalities and who are all working together to try to stop this sorceress from doing some very bad things. It does get a little spooky scary. I wouldn't class this as horror by any means, but there is some really gross stuff that happens. People die, there's a demon, it gets a little spooky scary. I love the magic system in this. I've been wanting longer fantasy outside of the Saint of Steel series from T. Kingfisher for a long time, and I'm really, really happy that she released this book this year. I love her novellas, but I'm a much bigger fan of her full-length work, so I was super happy when this one came out. And I gave it 5 stars as well. I also read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which is a delectable little thriller. This was so fast-paced, so entertaining, perfect for a 24-hour readathon. I constantly wanted to know what was going to happen next. Our main character is reliving the same day 8 times and is trying to figure out what's happening, why he's in this loop, who this person Anna is, and is getting to see this day through all of these different perspectives. It's so well done. I loved it so much. Because of the way this is set up, we get to see a lot of different perspectives on this murder that's happening, but we also get to see and really connect to our main character a lot. There is something going on overarching as to why our main character is in this place, and there's kind of a twist and a reveal at the end about that, which I thought was interesting. I loved this. Honestly, I would reread this in the future. I think it's a super, super entertaining thriller. I give it 4 stars. I really liked it. I also read A House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman, and this was our 3rd 5-star of the month. I ate this up. I ate up every single page of this. I read this in the middle of the night and it kept me up because I loved it so much. We're following our two main characters. They're teenagers. They're going on their first date. They canoe out to this lake and they find a house submerged at the bottom of it. They decide to explore this house. So as their relationship progresses and they fall more in love, they're also exploring this house and there's scary things that are going on in there. If you hate an ambiguous ending, you're probably not going to like this, but I adored it. And I really liked having this really pure and innocent and teenage love story happen throughout these pages. It was also scary. Like, I was scared of what was going on in this house and I didn't want bad things to happen to our characters. And then we slowly start to see kind of like everything falling apart and it just, your heart breaks for these people. I loved the amount of horror that was in this. It's probably not going to be enough horror for some people. It's probably going to be too much for others. I loved it. I definitely would pick up another novella from Josh Malerman. I'm not sure if Bird Box would be for me, but let me know. I know some of you guys love Bird Box, so maybe I should bite the bullet and pick that up soon. But I love this one. That's all the 24 readathon. Let's chat about The Saint of Steel. Let's chat about Paladin's Faith. So if you've been here for a while, you know I DNF'd this the first time I read it because I had reread the entire Saint of Steel series at the beginning of the year. And then by the time I got to book 4, I was over it. I was over the Paladins. All of our male love interests in this series are Paladins. They are Paladins of the Saint of Steel, who is a god who has died. And so they are really traumatized, lost, trying to figure out how to be good people when they don't have their saint behind them. And they are berserker paladins, so they go into like this fit of fighting rage. And it was before, when the saint was alive, guided by the saint, guided by this good power, and now it's a much scarier thing for them to be in. The reason why I chose to pick this up now is because I was waiting for the audiobook to come out. I'm so happy that I did. It's narrated by Joel Richards and he is so good at narrating these. He has the perfect voice for all of our big strong man paladins and he just does such a good job. Obviously I have the physical copy of this, so once I had the opportunity to stop reading the audiobook and start picking it up physically, and I put it back down and I put the audiobook back on because the audiobook is just so good. Like, I didn't want to read it physically because the audiobook is so incredible. So if you're an audiobook lover, this series is definitely for you. Our paladin in this book is named Shane. He's very not self-confident. He's not sure of himself. He thinks that he always does the wrong thing. He's gonna fall in love with Marguerite, who you may know from book 1 if you read book 1. She is an incredible woman. There are spies in here. There is court intrigue. We have a demonic cult in here. The fantasy plot of this book is so good. It was absolutely incredible. Obviously, I love the romances that are in here, but they truly stand on their own as fantasy plots without the romance happening. And I think I felt that in this one even more so than the rest of the books that came before. There was so much in here to eat up as far as a fantasy plot that was super intriguing and interesting and fast-paced. And I felt really connected to all of our characters, not just our two in this relationship. And I can't wait to read more in this series as T. Kingfisher writes them. Which means that the last book we have to talk about is Dune. I finally read Dune. I immediately picked up the second one and I'm hooked. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I read this primarily via audiobook. I do also have the ebook on my Kindle as well, but I really do like the audiobook. I think it's really well produced, so I think I'm going to continue with the audiobooks in this series. I just think it's a really cool world to get into. There's so much lore and history there, and we get to follow Paul as he is whisked off of this water world that he grew up on to Arrakis, which is a desert planet, and there's this spice there that kind of controls everything, and it's a drug and it's their source of revenue and power, and water is so important there. And so it's so interesting to learn these people who've grown up on Arrakis and how different their view of water is from our main character who has grown up on a water world, and so he's swam in water before, and that concept to them is just so bizarre. And I remember at one point he has to explain what drowning is to someone, and it's just not a concept that makes sense to them at all. I am really intrigued to see where this series goes from here. I did immediately start picking up Dune Messiah and immediately lost interest in the entire thing. So I'm really hoping that it picks back up again and that I'm interested in the rest of the series, but I just got so connected to our characters that we were following in the original Dune, and I just want to hang out with them more, and I don't really care about the new people. Anyways, I still haven't seen part 2 of the movie, so I'm interested to see how much of that covers. I was talking to my dad about it, and based on what he was saying, I feel like even the entirety of the first book is not covered in the first 2 movies. You let me know in the comments if you've watched the movies and read the books, if you know more than I do, what you think's going on with the movie schedule and the book schedule, because I would like to follow along and read the books as the movies are produced. And that's everything that I read in August. Just kidding. Popping in here to tell you that I forgot to tell you about The Art Thief, which was 3 stars. This is the nonfiction that we read this month, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I was super sleep deprived when I read this, and I don't remember a lot of what happened, but it is a true story of this like Bonnie and Clyde couple who stole a bunch of art. I think he's like the most prolific art thief ever. He had an apartment that was just filled with stolen art because he never sold any of it. He was a collector, as he liked to call himself. He wanted to keep the art and look at it, and he would go into museums and see art and just couldn't bear to leave it there and wanted to see it further up close, so he would steal it and put it in his house. It was really interesting to hear about all of the theories about this guy and people who like him because he says that he's not a thief and he wouldn't sell art for money, but then he ends up kind of doing some of that later on in life. All of the different interactions with different court systems and legal trouble and prison that he gets into, as well as his relationships with his mother and his girlfriend, were super interesting. I would love to watch a documentary about this. I feel like because it's art, I found myself really wanting to see the pictures, and I read this on audiobook, so I'm almost positive that the physical book does have some inserts with the pictures of the actual artwork themselves. But because I read it on audiobook, I felt like I was kind of missing something with this, so I would love to see a documentary about this. That, or I wish I had read the physical book so I could see the painting, since it is such a visual tale, if you will. Overall, I had a good time with it. It wasn't my favorite thing that I've ever read, but once again, I was very sleep deprived when I read it, so take that with a grain of salt. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a little detached, like I wanted to be not fictionalized, but a little bit more just dialogue, because it was very he said this, she said this, and then he said this, and then this guy said this, like interview style writing, and I feel like it probably would have read better, again, physically and not in the audiobook, or if it was written just reading like dialogue instead of reading like I was reading a transcript of an interview. It got a little annoying when I was reading it with my ears. Overall, I had a good time. Really interesting story. Once again, would love to see a documentary about it. And those are my thoughts on that. And that is everything that we read in August. It's kind of a slower reading month for me. Most of these books were read in a 24-hour time period, but there was a lot of traveling and a lot of things going on, and there are a lot of half-finished books that obviously I can't tell you about until I finish them, but reading has been done. I just can't tell you about all of it. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I have some incredibly exciting things happening in September. We are moving. I have some big news to share with you guys, and I have some big videos to put out as well. So I'm looking forward to all of that. I'm also going to be trying to post more on TikTok and on Shorts, so if you're not following me over there, you might want to go give me a follow. I promise I will be more active than I have been in the last few months, and we can hang out and chat about books together. Okay, I love you all so much. Thank you for hanging out. Please let me know what you have been reading in August, and let me know what you're looking forward to reading in September. Otherwise, I will see you all next week. Bye.